Welcome to the Board of Education meeting of July 19th, 2011. I am pleased to welcome our new superintendent, Dave Pruneau. We are very glad to have you here. I hope that all of you will take the time to read his very inspiring message that he has on our homepage. If you scroll down to the announcement of his coming, you will enjoy it, I think. We also have with us Mr. Chris Walton, Assistant Superintendent for, what are you, Business and Finance? Finance and Business? Finance and Operations, okay. Dr. Charles Johns, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. On his left is Brett Hillman, who is our new Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. And last but not least, we have continuing Assistant Superintendent for Student Services and Special Education, I don't know your title either, obviously, Meg Schnorr, who is the one with the experience and the knowledge and the district history who's going to, and the hair, who's going to carry us along. Welcome to all of you. We are glad to have you as our new team. Mrs. Walsh, could you please call the roll of the board?
Mr. Bloom?
Here.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Mrs. Droney?
Here.
Mrs. Ebner?
Here.
Ms. Hirsch is absent. Mr. McDonough?
Here.
Mrs. Stufen?
Here. 6 board members present. Ms. Hirsch is absent. She could not be with us this evening. Would you please join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business tonight is a fun one, student recognition. Mr. Pruneau.
Yes, this evening it's a pleasure, and I'm going to turn this over to Laura Fennensteel, the principal of Jefferson, and she has a very special student with her this evening, and we would like to recognize the students. So Laura, I'll allow you to do the honors.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Laura Fannestill, principal of Jefferson School, and where Megan attended 5th grade. We're very, very proud of her today. All of our 5th grade students participated and created a poster, and the theme of the poster was bicycling is fun and healthy too. And, oops, you're starting to come in your face here. And the purpose of this poster was to get our 5th grade students thinking about all the positive things that bicycling can do for yourself and for the environment. And so Megan's poster was chosen out of all of our 5th grade students to be submitted to the state, and she's a winner, so we're very, very proud of her. Every time we look at a piece of art, we all take away something different, and I would just like to share with you what I see when I look at Megan's piece of art. I see the world, and on the world, or going around the world, is a bike path. And on this bike path, we have some students who are riding their bikes with bicycle safety helmets on and large smiles. And an interesting feature that I saw when I looked at her poster was that the shape of their faces was in the shape of a heart. And that, to me, said that this is a healthy thing that you can do for your body. When I looked at the earth, I saw the continents. And on the continents, there were little captions that were written, all supporting the theme. Bicycling is fun and healthy too. And the little captions read, save the environment, riding bikes are a great form of exercise, ride your bike instead of a car, use the inexpensive way to travel, and my favorite, which is going around the earth, is change the world one bike at a time. Now, she's spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on this, and Megan, we are so very proud of you. Mm-hmm. And we know that a lot of other great things are going to come from you. So congratulations again. Third place winner from the state.
Stay here, Megan.
Oh, Megan.
Stay here just for a moment. I just want to also add my congratulations to you. I looked it up online. You see, we have it up here for everyone to see. It's a great poster, and art always has a message, and your message seems to be particularly relevant, I think, to the students and teachers and families of District 205. So thank you very much. We are very proud of you. And as I was doing a little research on the award that you won, I was looking up some things and found out that Malia Smith has put them all down for me right here on this proclamation, so I'm just going to read them for you. Whereas the League of Illinois Bicyclists, LIB, is the statewide advocate for all Illinois bicyclists, promoting bicycle access, education and safety, and Active Transportation Alliance, ATTA, advocates for transportation that encourages and promotes safety, physical activity, health, recreation, social interaction, equity, environmental stewardship, and resource conservation. And whereas the LIB and the ATA partnered with Saris Cycling Group to sponsor a poster contest for fifth graders throughout the state of Illinois, promoting the benefits of riding a bike. And whereas individual schools selected a winner to advance to the competition at the state level, and 44 schools across the state entered the poster contest with the theme of "Bicycling is fun and healthy too." And whereas Jefferson Elementary School fifth grader Megan Quinn was chosen as the third place winner in the state competition and was awarded a bicycle light, and whereas this accomplishment brings pride and prestige to Jefferson Elementary School, to District 205, and to the community, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express deep appreciation and congratulations to Megan for her outstanding performance in this competition. Congratulations. This is for you. And that is for you as well. Thanks. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comments. 4 people have indicated that they wish to address the board this evening. I will call your names, and when you come to the podium, please turn it on. Indicate your name and address for the record, and we will start with Peggy Ostajic. And as she is coming up, I will remind everyone that it is not the practice of the board to respond to public comments, but please be assured that the entire board and administration are listening very carefully. Mrs. Ostajic.
Thank you, and I'd like to start again with a warm welcome to our new superintendent and our new cabinet members. We very much appreciate you coming to our district and sharing your skills with our students. And also thank you to the board for the opportunity to speak before you tonight. I'm here to talk about something I experienced a lot when I sat on that side of the table. I think as a district we have a tremendous amount of motivation and improving student achievement. We know what we want to accomplish. The problem we've consistently had is the how. And that's something that in execution we've had difficulty with. And I'm here specifically speaking about how a change is being implemented at Churchville Middle School. They have a unique program there. There's a 2-year REACH program, 6th and 7th grade, and a teacher who has developed this program and has done, I would say, extraordinary things with the kids. I know you've gotten emails over the last month or so about this. There's a lot of parents here tonight that are here that continue to express their interest. And I guess the concern that we're trying to communicate on this is, we're hearing that we want to implement PLCs. Well, the PLC model would say you try to understand what you're doing well and build on that. You don't deconstruct it for scheduling convenience. We've made a commitment as a district to make data-driven decisions, and I could tell you from anecdotally from my 2 students who have been through the program, and every parent that I've talked to, the impact this has had on their students, and all the way through qualifying for the right colleges. So we have a school that's under represented in every category of high level of achievement, significantly overrepresented on the bottom trail where we have a lot of Title I funds going to a lot of the students, trying to build them up. But at some point, we have to think about the kids at the top and how to bring more into it, how to push those along. And we need to keep some resources there at that level. So we seem to break everything down and focus on, bringing everybody up, but we're never pushing kids up at the top. And I guess what I'm asking for is just a real commitment to follow through on some of the things that we say we want to do. We want to make data-driven decisions. Look at how these kids are performing. We want to implement the PLC model. Why aren't we taking this program and building off of it instead of breaking it down and calling it, what we've heard is that we're trying to create grade level teams. Well, what's actually being done isn't creating grade level teams. You're taking an effective in place 2-year model and you're applying it to 7th and 8th grade instead of 6th and 7th with a teacher who hasn't been in the classroom for 15 years. So what I would say is, why don't we look at what we're doing, figure out how to do it more, replicate it, help the other teachers learn from it, instead of breaking it down and calling it something that it's really not. This isn't, what's happening here isn't about implementing PLCs, and it definitely isn't data-driven decision-making. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you, and I just hope that from the top down, the leadership is sending the right message all the way through the district. We're not implementing models blindly. We're looking and understanding what we're doing and not creating unintended consequences. So thank you.
The next speaker is Patsy, and I'm sorry I cannot read your last name. You'll have to say it when you get to the microphone, please.
Hi, my name is Patricia Schlecht, 797 North Eastland Street. Everyone who has come in support of our cause, please stand. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Patsy Schlecht. I'm the mother of 3 girls, a sophomore, an 8th grader, and a 6th grader. My 2 oldest girls are successful in their first years at Churchville, greatly due to the Reach English program run by Molly Nekteval. As many Churchville parents would agree, Ms. Nekteval has a special way of connecting with her students and helping them transition into middle school and higher levels of Reach English learning. I am hoping that this program continues with Ms. Nekteval at the helm so that my 3rd child and all the students at Churchville Middle School will receive the benefit of Ms. Nekteval's expertise and experience in teaching Reach students. I and several other parents are at a loss as trying to figure out why this highly effective and accomplished looping program would be dismantled and replaced with the unknown. I thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you. The next speaker is Elizabeth Dirkscheide. Elizabeth Dirkscheide.
Good evening. Welcome, Mr. Purnell. Hello to the board and all. Thank you for a few minutes here. My name is Elizabeth Dirkscheide. I reside at 301 North Addison Avenue. I have 4 children in District 205 schools, 1 at Emerson, 2 at Churchville Middle School this year, and a junior at York High School. Before I start, I would like to call my attention as well to the comments prior in support, and I've written to some of the board about that as well. But tonight, I would like to call your attention to a new booster organization at York High School, the York Academic Boosters. I'm co-chairing this committee with Holly Cost, who's over at the outdoor band concert tonight, and we have a couple other members of this newly formed committee with us tonight, Barb Dean and Donna Mueller, as well as, I know, people who are scurrying to sign up. As a new committee at York PTSA, we are committed to raising school and community awareness of academic achievement at York High School. We plan to do this by partnering with York and the community to recognize both high achievers and those who strive to improve, by working to increase participation in and recognition of academically related clubs and activities, at York and in the community, and advocating for strong and diverse course offerings that challenge every student. In preparing to kick off our Boosters organization this year, we have met with York Principal Diana Smith, presented some of our ideas to students in the York Advisory Team, and have been working in small groups this summer. Ms. Smith has been very open to our ideas, and we look forward to working with her and her team in the coming school year. We'd be pleased to have representation from the administration and Board of Education at our upcoming meetings, which will be held the first Thursday of each month at 8 a.m. in the Yorker room. We're especially pleased that a couple of board members have already expressed interest in our group. We also welcome all of your ideas about how our community can best promote academic achievement at York High School. Thank you.
And our last speaker is Linda Elliott.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I did read Dr. Pruneau's statement on District 205 website, and I briefly want to quote him. And he said, "I believe that individuals and groups have the answers to the difficult issues we will face, and through their shared commitment will create an exceptional educational environment for every child." I speak tonight again about the issue of Ms. Nekbatal and the Churchville teaching. And I think it's important for us to come back to this issue. I know we had a parent meeting with Michelle Brown on May 31st and had a chance to talk to her and ask her questions about why she was instituting this change at Churchville. On June 14th, we had a school board meeting when we had speakers and parents here in support of keeping Ms. Nekbatal at the 6th and 7th grade looping instruction. And again, we're here tonight just to remind you that this is an important issue that we haven't really received full answers to yet. I stand here really wearing three hats tonight. I'm an educator. I teach at Oakland Community College, and I've taught writing and reading there for a long time. And so I have an invested interest in language arts and teaching writing and seeing that that instruction is of the highest quality. I'm also a REACH PTA rep. I've been the Conrad Fisher rep for a number of years, and this fall I will also be the Churchville rep for REACH PTA. And I stand here as a parent of two boys who are in District 205. My older son just completed Churchville and will start York in the fall, and my younger son is coming into Churchville and is in the REACH PTA program at Churchville, and will have Ms. Nekbatal in 6th grade, and I sincerely hope for 7th grade as well. A few points I want to make. Just first, as an educator, I do believe that writing is critical. I know that it's been taken off the ISATs for the high school level, that writing is not going to be tested, but I do believe that it's an essential skill that we need to start teaching our students at a very early level. Middle school is important in grabbing students and getting them to get engaged in all of their academic studies, but I believe that Ms. Nekbatal has really taken that program at Churchville and done well with it. As a REACH rep, I also know that sometimes the REACH point of view hasn't always been heard here at District 205. I think that it's very important to maintain District 205's commitment to quality education and to provide instruction for students at all levels. But at Churchville, among all the middle school REACH programs, here's an educational setup that displays instruction at a superior level. And I think if we change the looping program, the students will not benefit as much. Is that time up? Yeah, okay.
That is, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for listening.
If there are things that you didn't get to say that you'd like to leave with us in writing, we'd be happy to take them. Mrs. Walsh can take them from you.
Okay, I'll certainly do that. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comments, leading us to superintendent's communication. Mr. Pruneau.
Yes, thank you. If the board would indulge me this evening, I just want to make a couple of brief comments about my arrival here in Elmhurst and what I've been doing for all of 2 weeks. But first of all, I want to thank my support team here at this office, the cabinet members that you were introduced, Malia and Dave, who also are sitting there. They've been very supportive of the new guy walking in. I know a lot of us are new, but it's been a great 2 weeks to get to know the district, to start reaching out and meeting with constituents and stakeholders of the district. And as you know, I submitted a draft form of a 100-day transition plan that the board members received, I believe, in April or May. And the board members have not had time to sit down with me and talk about that 100-day plan as a group. But basically, the 100-day plan is really to engage the community in discussions about where they want Elmhurst to be, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and then from there, devising some goals and some plans of how we can move forward. And I will tell you that my experience so far has been just people who are anxious to have that discussion about where we can take Elmhurst. And it's a great district. And I'm really encouraged by the conversations I've had. I think there's a lot of potential here. I think people are dedicated, working hard, and that's what I felt when I interviewed here. That certainly hasn't changed in the 2 weeks that I've arrived here. And I think it's very rewarding for me as a new superintendent to see that kind of commitment. And I think, going back to what I said during my interviews, I'm not the answer person, and I came here not with answers. I came here to facilitate everybody else doing that kind of problem solving to create the district that we want. So I just wanted to say thanks to the community, my cabinet, my administrators for the support I've received. And I have no doubt it's going to be a great journey of taking Elmhurst from where we are and taking it way beyond where it is right now. And I have no doubt that that's going to happen just because of the conversations I've had with people in the last 2 weeks, from the Board of Education to people on the street to city council members to everybody I've run into. So I want to thank the board for their support and my arrival, and look forward to working with you and the community, parents, teachers, my administrative team to create a really exceptional system. And while we have a lot of new people, and there's a haircut requirement that we're going to be instituting with the rest of these people, Meg, I'm sorry, don't get. I look forward to working with everybody. So thank you. I would like now to turn this over to Chris. Chris is going to go through an update of this past year's financials and give you an update on our revenues and expenditures for this past year. And so he has a PowerPoint presentation he'd like to present to the board this evening.
Thank you. My presentation tonight is about fiscal year 2011, which just ended June 30th. And I first wanted to break it down between operating funds and non-operating funds. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to focus on the operating funds tonight, which is the education fund, the operations, maintenance, transportation, IMRF, and working cash. The IMRF fund has been sometimes considered operating, sometimes considered non-operating. I consider it an operating fund. It's a regular cost of doing business for the school district. If the employer rate for IMRF were to increase, then we would have to increase property tax revenue or general state aid revenue in that fund. So that is why it is considered, I consider it an operating fund. But the non-operating funds, the debt service fund, the capital projects, and life safety fund had a relatively uneventful year. The debt service, we took in the revenues that for property taxes that we receive in order to pay the debts of the district, and that is what happened in that fund. The capital projects fund, we just had a few little projects to finish up phase 4 of the construction, which included a Madison roofing project and a Fields tuck pointing project. Other than that, there wasn't any other activity in the non-operating funds. The presentation tonight is unaudited, and it's on the cash basis. So the the audited version that of fiscal year 2011, which will come to you in November, December, might look, the numbers will be different because of the accrual entries that the auditors will make. But this slide, I kind of cut to the chase here. It's the last page of the book so that no one moves ahead. This is our funds, our operating funds, a summary of the fund balances, revenues, expenditures, and ending fund balances. And as you can see, the district finished the year with revenues in excess of expenditures, which so with the current funding environment for schools, with revenues being really flat and expenditures increasing at a faster rate than revenues, this is really a positive that the district was able to finish up with a positive year and hold off on deficit spending for future years. Our operating fund balances here have gone up based on revenues exceeding expenditures, and you can see that we ended the year with 29% of fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. This means that we finished the fiscal year with 15 weeks or 3.5 months of expenditures in reserves at June 30th, 2011. This slide I just wanted to, the current fund balance policy shows a 25% requirement in fund balance, and we finished the year at 29% for the operating funds. This slide is to show you the individual funds, to show you where each of the operating funds is as a percentage of expenditures, where the education fund is at 22%, the operations and maintenance fund 57%, the transportation fund is less than 1% at 0.55%, and the IMRF fund at 17.38%. This slide is to show our mix of revenues between the local, state, and federal, and then I compared District 205 to the state average. And as you can see, the district is very much reliant on local funds when you compare it to the state average, which our local funds are at 89% compared to the local funds of the state average at 52%, which is primarily due to the property tax, EAV, and that sort of thing, and the low income percentage. We don't receive as much state funding as other school districts in the state. Our local funds are made up primarily of property taxes. We have 83% of our revenues coming from property taxes. The other local funds include corporate personal property replacement taxes, tuition, interest, food sales, student fees, textbooks, facility rentals, donations, and other. From the state, we receive 8.24% of our revenues, including 3.21 from general state aid, 3.75 from the special ed state aid. Transportation state aid is less than 1% at 0.94, and then other state aid. The federal grants, we only receive 2.76% from the federal government, and you can see that 1% of that is from the ARRA grants, which we will not, as of now, there's no, those funds are over in fiscal year 2011. The budget variances that we experienced in the, from a revenue standpoint, property taxes is the biggest reason, biggest variance, where we received 2.8 million more than budget, and was a very conservative budget for property taxes, and the budget underestimated the consumer price index, which under the tax cap, our property taxes are tied to the CPI. Interest earnings were short of budgeted, and I think that is primarily due to the decline of interest rates, and as the maturities come off, our interest earnings just have been declining, and that caused that shortfall. Food services revenues declined in FY11, and state funding, we exceeded budget. So I think we budgeted for only one of the quarterly payments, where we actually received 2 out of the 4 payments for mandated categorical programs from the state for fiscal year 11. So the other 2 payments are still outstanding at this point. Federal grants was really a timing issue that we received, that we were short of budget. We should be receiving that money from our special ed co-op SASSET in July or August. On the expenditure side of the equation, this pie chart shows where our expenditures are, what they comprise, and salaries and benefits, of course, is the biggest item that our expenditures are, and that is primarily, that's because we are a service organization providing education services, so it's very labor intensive, and salary and benefits is going to be 80% of our expenditures. The variances on the expenditure side, we really, the biggest thing that we're going to work on for the FY12 budget, which we'll be presenting the tentative budget at the August board meeting, we're focusing in on position control and the salary budgets, and my department in the business office is working closely with the human resources department to really focus in on budgeting the staffing. So we'll illustrate that in the budget presentation in August. Also, because last year in the 2011, there were some anticipated positions and vacancies that weren't budgeted for. Also, some grant expenditures that were not budgeted for resulted in our expenditures exceeding budget in some of the grant areas. This last slide is just a summary of the operating revenues compared to expenditures, where you can see the positive variance on the revenue side, which is primarily property taxes, and the expenditures, that's a negative variance where we exceeded budget on the expenditure side, with the final outcome of a positive net income of $2,592,100.
Thank you, Mr. Weldon. Are there questions from the board? Mr. Collins?
Chris, I don't mean to quiz you in your second week of the job here, but maybe we can talk kind of just in general terms. When I look at your charts, the education fund alone is at 22%. And so to look at it in aggregate and say it's 29%, that means that if you fell short in one fund, you would have to start moving money around from one fund to another.
That's right.
So
the working cash fund, which I don't show it here, but it also can help to in a cash flow shortfall to loan to the other funds is another way we can do that.
And how easy would it be to move from operations and maintenance to education, or IMRF to education fund? Is that an easy or a not so easy thing to do?
not so easy. I think you would be better off with moving money from the working cash fund. Or you can adjust your tax levy, or the other stream you can go to is general state aid can be allocated differently, which in the current year we had allocated 150,000 general state aid to operations and maintenance. Probably be better off next year to put it in education rather than allocating general state aid to the operations and maintenance fund.
And, well, let me stick with the education fund. Let me go to operations and maintenance for a minute. For the education fund, so we're at 22% right now. If we said that fund alone needed to be at 25%, we're 3% short, and that translates to about $2.5 million short in the education fund. Okay. And then when you did this calculation, I mean, you compared it to the only thing you had, which was last year's
That's right.
expenditures.
Right.
When probably be intellectually more accurate if we compared it to next year, the funds we have on hand on July 1st versus our budget for all of these funds for the 2011-2012 school year, right?
I agree with you, and we'll show it that way in next month's budget presentation.
Okay. And then you also said the $1 million in AARA grants go away. This last
right.
school year was the last year for them. The transportation fund, where do most of its funds come from?
It's a combination of property taxes and state aid, and we also, the transportation state aid, but we also received some funding from, we put some general state aid we also allocated into the transportation fund. And I believe next year there will also be some student fees that will be going in there.
Okay, and how far, what percentage would you say comes from the state, just roughly, ballpark? Half of it, three quarters?
No, I would say it's, hold on one second,
And
I have it
I
here.
don't mean to put you on the
That's all
spot.
right.
You've been here all of 10 days.
The transportation fund, in that fund, we had revenues of $838,000 in general state aid and $941,000 in transportation state aid. So $1,779,000 came from the state out of a total budget of $3,177,000. So it was
Okay,
more than
so
half.
just over half.
Yes.
And how far behind is the state in paying us?
Well, 2 out of 4 payments.
So they paid us roughly half of what they owe us?
Half.
Okay, so theoretically, we could be $750,000 short if they keep up their payment record.
Right.
Okay, so we're $2.5 million short, another $1 million short, and then another $750,000 short. Okay, I'm just trying to get a picture for what could lie ahead. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Boom.
Just one follow-up on the transportation thing. My understanding from Pat's presentation before in the budget is we assume that past behavior continues and that what we're receiving is prior years, what they're owed to us this year. So if they're 700 short, we're projecting them to be 700 short, but we're picking up 700 from a prior year that they owe us. So they're always kind of 2 payments behind, I think. Is that what
That's
you're
right.
You're budgeting
Right.
that we don't have a full, at any one point in time, we have a full year's worth of reimbursement that's just not there for us. So for them to get worse, they would have to have that year behind plus, so they would have to stretch it to a year and a half.
If I thought the revenue situation in the state of Illinois was getting any better, I'd agree with that.
I'm not opining as to the likelihood of that happening, but I just mechanically. So my question is just, I mean, I look at this and I say, what we took in more than we thought we were going to take in. We spent a little more in certain places than we thought we were, but on a net basis, we had more money than we thought we were going to have at the beginning. The other part of that, though, is that you've got certain fund balances, and when you decompose the issue to this slide here, there are certain fund balances that are lagging and others that are in excess. These issues, talking about transferring funds, are things that need to work themselves out, particularly over years. It's a lot more difficult within intra-year to move money from fund to fund. So my question would be that as we get into the fiscal 11-12 budget, then just as a for instance, you would probably reduce the levy on the operations and maintenance side to pull that fund balance down. So the targets for each fund are 25 per fund, or they all have different targets?
The target is in the aggregate, in the board fund balance policy is in the aggregate for the operating funds, but it's a rule of thumb just that, the 25% is really the target.
But when you apply that aggregate, so I mean, the aggregate, to Jim's point earlier, may lead to a misleading conclusion if you look at the aggregate slide. Now you look at these slides where we're over-reserved in certain places and under-reserved in others. As a budget person, as you're targeting it, do you have targets for each one of these funds at different levels? Or, I mean, where do you feel comfortable? Should we be thinking about it from a policy perspective at a more granular level? Because that's going to impact our tax levies and our policy as it pertains to how we're going to go after money.
I think the aggregate is the best approach because you also have the working cash fund that can be loaned to the other funds in a cash shortfall situation.
But to get that working cash replenished, though, you're going to have to levy the following year to replenish the working cash.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I understand the short-term
I think
kind
you
of
probably,
bridges, but
the best policy would have to have an aggregate, but also some guidelines as far as individual funds.
because I'm saying there's two objectives when you're budgeting now. I'm assuming when we go into the next thing, one is what are we spending the money on, and what are we levying, and two is the balance sheet side of that, which is what does that leave us vis-a-vis the fund balances that we want. So we've got an expenditure target and a fund balance target, and so I would hope that when we present those, when we look at our budget, if our policy is is to fund as much education as we can, within the limits of reasonable tax policy, but then while maintaining an appropriate cushion in our fund balances and the flexibility to make sure that we don't fall short, I would like to see, kind of what balances would you kind of under levy this year to kind of, release that? And to Jim's point, would you levy an extra, $2 million in the education fund to get that up to where we need it to be because of, the fiscal responsibility that we want to have?
Well, really where this comes from is the need so that your cash position doesn't get to a point where you need to do short-term borrowing. So that is the reason for the fund balance policy and the need for the balance sheet, the fund balances. So as we move forward, and I've only been here 2 weeks, I'm going to study the cash flow in order to figure out at what point would we need to do short-term borrowing, which would be tax anticipation warrants. So, so that's where the thinking would be in trying to figure out what the best fund balance percentage would be, is to figure out at what point do we get to that, what point in the year is our lowest point from a cash fund balance position. So that's thought. But I do agree with you. You probably need to think in terms of the aggregate, but also the individual.
Yeah, because that would be my concern is, let's say the transportation fund drops below and we don't have the money. I mean, I'm not sure what the fund balance in the working cash account is, but if
4.4 million.
So if you happen to exhaust that, but yet you've got extra cash over in operations and maintenance, but you can't move it. So we as a district then have to issue tax anticipation notes to fund a fund balance that, even though we've got cash on our balance sheet, which is somewhat inefficient for us to do. So, I think it behooves us to take a look at some of these balances and maybe reallocate the levy to get them where they need to. And it seems like because of the restrictions on moving between funds, you have to look at the budget on those fund-by-fund basis, because if you miss, you could end up issuing warrants even though you've got cash.
I agree.
Is that okay?
Any other questions? Mrs. Ebner?
I just had a quick question about the non-operating funds for the debt service. The expenditures were a little over 300,000 more than the revenues for that. You explained the one for the capital projects with our two capital projects. I was just wondering about that.
It's that really has to do with the timing of the debt payments in comparison with the revenues from the property taxes. It's really not a not going to be an issue for us that the expenditures exceeded revenues in the fiscal year. It's just a timing issue.
Anyone else? Mr. Collins?
I just have one more for you. I understand in the capital projects budget, I mean, you can get some surprises. All of a sudden, you need a new roof, or an air conditioning chiller goes out, and then those are chunky expenses, so you want to have a decent-sized reserve there. But in the operations and maintenance fund, help me understand how that differs from the capital projects, particularly in terms of volatility. Are there surprises there? Are there big chunky surprises, or really that just doesn't occur?
You can use the maintenance fund for those chunky surprises. If you, at the board's discretion, wanted to do that. But the capital projects fund was raised by the referendum and the debt that was issued at that time. And so you really could use either the operation maintenance fund or the capital projects fund. But once that capital projects fund balance is gone, there's no more levies for it, where the operation and maintenance fund is an annual levy.
The capital projects fund, the only way you replenish that is go back to referendum
Yes.
and borrow some more money.
That's correct.
Mr. Bloom?
And just to follow up on Jim, so the capital projects fund is basically a restricted fund to projects that were identified within the referendum.
That's right.
If you have capital projects outside of the capital projects fund, it would come out of the operations and maintenance fund, more than likely. I mean, short of going to referendum for.
That's right, but in the capital projects fund, if there are funds left after the projects are completed, you can transfer that capital project balance over to the operation and maintenance fund.
Okay.
If there's money left over after all construction is completed from the purposes that were stated in the referendum.
Okay. And, I mean, I guess we can do this in the budget coming forward, but it'd be helpful to understand, given that capital projects fund balance and then the percentage of completion of the projects that was levied for and kind of where we are and how much, maybe surplus may be there at some point in time for doing that. And then one other request, you may be doing this already, and I really apologize for this, but it'd be helpful for me when you go through the budget to show last fiscal year next to what the current budget is so that we can get some sense of the growth and
I will do
movement
that.
in between years.
I will do that.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We appreciate all of the work that went into this presentation when you were still trying to find your way to the lunchroom. And again, thanks. We appreciate it.
Yeah, let me just add, thanks to Chris. I know he's been hitting the ground, trying to get up to speed. I know the board knows this, but just the obvious, it's a good news, bad news scenario this evening. Good news is we came out ahead on the revenue side compared to expenditures. The bad news is the unpredictability and unstableness of school funding in the state of Illinois as it is across the country. And I think what we need to do is stay the course and see what develops this coming year, because you've just gone through $3 million cuts this past year. You don't want to repeat that again. And so hopefully this will give us a little bit of cushion to say, let's hold on for next year, maintain what we have, and see what the outcome is from a lot of state funding sources and there's a lot of discussion about school funding in the state of Illinois, as I know. So I think the prudent track right now is to hold tight, hold on as long as we can, be fiscally responsible with the funding that we have, and see what develops on a statewide basis and with property assessment and everything else in the long term. So, that would be, and the other thing that also states the obvious, in a fund equity position, once you spend the fund equity, you don't replenish that. It's gone. It's one-time funding. And you don't want to start spending that on ongoing operations that then you can't sustain over time. And that's the AAR money is a good example of that. It's gone now. And so how are we replacing that on the backfill? So just kind of stating the obvious for the board and the public.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of board meeting minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of June 13th, June 14th, June 21st, or June 27th? Mrs. Stufen.
Yes, I have a minor change to the June 13th minutes. I would propose that we change, on page 3 and page 8, there's reference to me referring to having, that us as a district having leading indicators versus lagging indicators. So I propose to change, in the minutes, it says lacking, L-A-C-K-I-N-G, to lagging. Minor but important. That's good.
Are there any objections to that change? Any other additions or corrections to the minutes of those dates? Seeing none, they will stand approved as amended. Next item on our agenda is the superintendent's consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? In it, we have the personnel report, financial reports, Freedom of Information Act requests, the approval of a donation to Lincoln Elementary School, approval of a Dell financial lease schedule, approval to dispose of surplus technology equipment, approval to authorize an agent for the IMRF fund, the second reading of a new policy required by law on identity protection, and then a number of first readings of new policies that are primarily housekeeping changes and legal reference changes. Does anyone wish to remove any of those items from the consent agenda? Mr. McDonough.
Item E, Dell financial lease schedule.
Okay, anything else? Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of all the items that I just said, minus item E, the approval and ratification of the Dell financial lease schedule?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved by Mrs. Ebner. Is there a second? Moved by Mrs. Ebner, seconded by Mr. Collins to approve the consent agenda minus item E. Mrs. Walsh, could you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch is absent. Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mrs. Stukin?
Yes.
6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion carries. We have one remaining item, item E, the approval and ratification of the Dell financial lease schedule. Is there a motion? Mr. McDonough.
I move that the Board of Education approve and ratify the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations execution of the Dell Financial Services lease purchase schedule number 810-6463052-003 to the master lease agreement with commencement date of July 1, 2011.
Is there a second? Moved by Mr. McDonough, seconded by Mr. Collins to approve the Dell Financial Lease Services Agreement. Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry.
Mr. McDonough.
I removed this just to ask the simple question, what is it that we didn't approve last time? When I look at this, it looks like exactly the same thing. So it's just a quick question.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I figured.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Actually, it is exactly the same thing. The original approval was to enter into the lease agreement, but there were some general parameters about not to exceed limits in terms of the purchase price and the lease payments. And in the end, when we finally got all the details hammered out and the exact dollar amounts down to the penny and everything, our legal counsel recommends that I bring the final information back just for ratification so that there's a record that we in fact are within the limits that were approved, and that actually in the end, this is a requirement for part of the lease process. The lease agencies often require a legal opinion letter that requires that this final step be taken. So it's really a formality, but it's to just dot the I and cross the T on the details of that.
But it's within the parameters that our original approval.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's if it was outside the parameters, I probably have a different recommendation to bring to you. But this is really just to show you that we were within the limits, and that that it just finalizes the information for the record.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Good question. Any other discussion? Do we need a roll call or a voice vote? We already approved the expenditure. Let's have a roll call, just to be safe.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch is absent.
6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the posting of our upcoming meetings. We also have to add to this calendar an August 10th meeting, which will be a board self-evaluation meeting with the Illinois Association of School Boards. The person with us will be Dean Langdon, who worked with us at our very first board learning meeting. That will be on August 10th at 7 p.m. here. We also have the regularly scheduled business meeting on August 16th and the workshop meeting on September 13th. Next item is board communications. Yes, Mrs. Ebner.
I just had a question about upcoming meetings. Are we going to also have August 11th for the retreat, or I thought it was two nights, or is it just the one?
Right now, it's the one night. We were polling to see whether or not we could find our availability. Our availability centered around either of those 2 nights. All 7 of us were available either of those nights. The IASB can help us on the 10th only. Now, at that meeting, we will determine whether or not we need to have further meetings, whether we're going to, what we're going to do with it. I'll be talking with Mr. Langdon in the next couple of weeks to set an agenda for that meeting. A couple of you have already sent me some ideas about what we want to be talking about. We probably won't do the full-fledged board self-evaluation meeting since we have done a part of that already. What we want to zero in on is how we're going to work with the superintendent, how we're going to work with each other, with the superintendent, that kind of thing. Communications, board norms, meeting agendas, that kind of thing. Mr. Collins. Sorry.
No,
Mr.
it's
Purnell.
good. I was just going to say, I think it's the beginning of a series of meetings with the Board of Education. I think the first meeting is initially just an operations meeting on communication, about working with the team, about how the board wants to operate as a team with the administration, those kinds of issues, so we're clear. And also information on next steps on goal setting, on how we're going to move forward on a number of issues. And then I can see this as a series going forward this year. And I apologize to the board for the time commitment, but that's probably going to happen. There's going to be a lot of working this year just to clarify a lot of issues that I think some of the board members have already brought forward. If you haven't and you have suggestions, I would encourage you to give either Susan and I those, so then we can start I can start working with Susan and with other board members, start chunking out those agendas, and then feed those back to you, so you have a good idea of what's coming forward and whether that meets your needs or not as a total Board of Education.
Mr. Collins.
Just an opinion. Having sat through a few of these in the last 2.5 years, I would prefer to start earlier rather than end later. So I don't know what our availability is to start before 7 o'clock.
I can check that with Dean Langdon to see if he can be here before 7. How early do you want to start?
Oh, 6? Is that?
I'll see. I'll ask him about that.
Thank you.
Any other board communications? Mr. McDonough.
Regarding that same topic, Shannon and Karen put together a really nice PowerPoint collecting all of our ideas of some of these orientation sessions. And I'm just wondering, is that going to go as is to Mr. Pernod? Does it need more work? Does it need comments?
Do you want me to answer that? Okay. We had sent the presentation out to all the board members asking for consensus agreement. When we receive that, we'll present it to Dave, and that will be the input, per our email, as we indicated, that will be the input, like one of the very first input, we as a board, one voice into Dave, starting the retreat process. And as David indicated, starting one of a series of meetings, strategy meetings, if you will, wrapping all of our heads around the district and what we want to accomplish and what we can and how we do it and all those sorts of things.
Any other board communications? Mrs. Ebner?
I just have a comment about the policy committee. We approved some policies tonight, and had some first readings, and there were 2 policies from our last meeting that we wanted to wait and get some input from you, Dave. So maybe we should schedule a policy meeting so you can look at these 2 policies that are on hold that we need to approve.
Anything else? Mr. Collins?
A quick report on July 11th. Mr. McDonough and I attended as the school board representatives to the Park City Schools Joint Committee, which we have just joined for the first time this year. And that is attended by 2 park board members, 2 members of the school board, and 2 aldermen, along with the executive director or equivalent of each of those organizations. Well, Mr. Pernod had been on the job for a few days. Our new city manager, that was literally his first day on the job and his very first thing he did. And the park is also undergoing a transition of executive directors. So this meeting was really kind of a meet and greet, know who each other are, get up to speed on a few issues that they had been talking about in the past. And if Mr. McDonough has anything to add?
There really wasn't much discussion, but a couple issues were raised, both in the updates that came out beforehand and mentioned briefly. 2 things I think I'd really like the administration to look at. Number 1 is there was a suggestion of a development of an office complex or something like that. My concern is whether that has some advantage to us, considering, the capital needs that we have and the resources we have. But also it was mentioned at the meeting there was possibility of using TIF 1 money, downtown TIF, on that. And it brought to mind, at least in my mind, the 2004 intergovernmental agreement, in which coming up in 3 years, is the promise by the city in that agreement that they would pay out surplus TIF funds. And I started wondering if we could start looking at, is there something on the horizon coming our way? What sort of things do we need to do to be proactive about preserving that to the extent there is something there? The other thing you raised in your update, your weekly update, was that the city has a consultant's report about development proposals, the 100-page report. And I would just recommend the other board members that you try to get a hold of it and take a look at it. And I'd ask Dave and Chris to, if you could please, start thinking about what the impacts would be for us, if any. So, that's it.
This 2004 agreement that Mr. McDonough is referring to was an agreement that the school board, not without controversy, agreed to extend the downtown TIF for 12 more years. And I would really be curious to know, it was done with an agreement that the city would make us whole, whatever that means. Of course, it's all done on assumptions. It's done on assumptions of what kind of growth there was going to be, but at least now we are in a position of being able to look backwards to see how much growth there really was and whether or not we got, what happened is they released a number of properties at the time in exchange for the extension of the TIF on a number of other properties. So I'm just curious if there's any way we can look at the numbers to see whether or not, in fact, we're coming out ahead, because the city promised us we would at least come out even. And Maybe a can of worms, maybe nothing, but it's certainly worth looking into.
And I can do that, so we will start looking into that and report back to the board.
Mrs. Stufen.
I just wanted to say thank you to John and you, Susan, for clarifying, that TIF situation. And I think we need to do our part and do the due diligence and just have the facts.
Any other board communications? In that case. Almost.
Was there a SACID meeting this month, July 16th, or? Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Mr. Bloom.
It was a meeting, there was an orientation, and Karen and I had gone to the orientation. They walked through a set of slides about what they do, what they provide, what their budget is, where it goes. So it wasn't a business meeting. It was an informational session. I think everybody got an invite. And do you have the slide? I mean, I guess we can share the slides with you guys, but it wasn't anything monumental from a business standpoint.
It was very good for me to understand the entire world that Meg runs for us. So thanks, Meg. But, I mean, seriously, I was filled with questions. And I said, sorry, Chris, he had to leave early to pick up a daughter. But I said, I got to ask all these questions. This is my opportunity because it was an overview, so I went. But Chris is our representative on SACID. But it was really good. And I can either talk with you and or show you the slides.
Anything else? Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All right, you're the
All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.